September 4th, 1872. The New York Sun devoted most of its 4 broadsheet pages to a single story. The headline, "The King of Frauds: How the Crédit Mobilier Bought Its Way Through Congress." What followed was the most explosive political corruption story in American history to that point. The sitting Vice President of the United States implicated, 12 sitting congressmen named, a future President of the United States on the list, and at the center of it all, a fake construction company, a transcontinental railroad, and $23 million that was supposed to build America's future. Stolen instead. To understand Crédit Mobilier, you need to understand what the government gave the Union Pacific Railroad. The passage of the Pacific Railroad Acts in 1862 and 1864 authorized the building of the Transcontinental Railroad and established Union Pacific. The government gave Union Pacific 45 million acres of public land, $60 million in government bonds, and a monopoly on the most strategically valuable transportation route in America. The largest single gift of public wealth to a private corporation in American history. In return, Union Pacific was supposed to build the eastern portion of the Transcontinental Railroad. The men who ran Union Pacific looked at that gift and saw something else, an opportunity. If this story is hitting the way we think it is, hit the like button. It helps more people find vault and ruin. And this is exactly the kind of story more people need to hear. In 1864, George Francis Train and Thomas C. Durant, then Vice President of the newly created Union Pacific Railroad, bought the Pennsylvania Fiscal Agency and renamed it Crédit Mobilier of America, specifically to build the eastern portion of the Transcontinental Railroad. The scheme was elegant and brazen. Union Pacific, funded by the government, hired Crédit Mobilier to build the railroad. Crédit Mobilier, owned by the same men who ran Union Pacific, charged whatever it wanted for the work. Crédit Mobilier had received $72 million in contracts for building a railroad worth only $53 million. $19 million in fraudulent overcharges, paid by the government, pocketed by the men who controlled both companies simultaneously. The construction company billing its own parent company at whatever price it chose, and the parent company, with government money, paying every invoice without question. The scheme required one more element. Congress had oversight of the railroad. If anyone looked too closely, the whole operation collapsed. One of the chief participants, Representative Oakes Ames of Massachusetts, had sold shares at bargain rates to roughly a dozen high-ranking House colleagues, including Schuyler Colfax, then Speaker of the House. Ames was a sitting congressman who simultaneously served on the House Committee on Railroads. He distributed discounted Crédit Mobilier shares to the men who were supposed to be overseeing the railroad's construction. His method was direct. He told a colleague he wanted to put the stock where it would do the most good. Ames undertook to manage Congress. The names on his list read like a roll call of American political power. The Vice President of the United States, the Speaker of the House, a future president. The men who were supposed to protect the public interest were shareholders in the company stealing from it. When the story broke, the names of many powerful Washington politicians were mentioned. This includes Vice President Schuyler Colfax, James Garfield, who denied the charges and was still elected president, Senator Henry Wilson, who was elected vice president, Schuyler Colfax, the sitting vice president of the United States, his political career destroyed instantly. Dropped from the Republican ticket for 1872. James Garfield, the Ohio congressman who had investigated the Black Friday gold panic of 1869 in our video 16. The man who had looked into Jay Gould's corruption was now on a list of men who had accepted discounted stock from Oakes Ames. Garfield denied it. He was elected President of the United States in 1880. A congressional investigation whitewashed almost everyone except Ames. The committee recommended his expulsion, but the House refused to take action. Ames's defenders argued that he had done nothing wrong except the patriotic act of building a railroad, and everybody built railroads with bribery and corruption, which was probably true. The scheme might never have been exposed. It was revealed not by a heroic journalist or a principled congressman. Henry S. Macomb, who was also interested in the scheme, put in his claim for a portion of the stock being used as a corruption fund for his friends. His claim involved him in a quarrel with Oakes Ames. In the summer of 1872, the quarrel between Ames and Macomb reached such a point that it was impossible to keep quiet. Macomb made public the facts in the case and published a list of the congressmen with whom Ames had said he had placed the stock, naming the number of shares sold to each. A falling out among thieves. Two men who had both profited from the scheme, fighting over who got more, accidentally exposing the entire operation to the press. The most important political corruption story of the Gilded Age, broken not because someone did the right thing, but because two criminals could not agree on how to divide the money. Public outrage and numerous news editorials led to two House committees and one in the Senate to investigate 13 congressmen in December 1872, with Ames, New York Democrat Representative James Brooks, and Republican Senator James Patterson of New Hampshire facing expulsion. The Poland Committee heard testimony through the winter of 1872 and 1873. Oakes Ames read his list of recipients aloud under oath, a roll call of the American political establishment accepting discounted stock from a man they were supposed to be overseeing. In the end, Ames and Brooks were censured for using political influence for personal financial gain in 1873, while all the rest, including Colfax and Garfield, who went on to be elected president in 1880, and Senator Henry Wilson, who replaced Colfax as Grant's vice presidential running mate, were absolved of any charges. Two men censured, everyone else absolved. The vice president, gone from the ticket but free. The future president, denied, investigated, absolved, elected. The pattern the Vault and Ruin series has been documenting for 19 videos was already fully formed in 1873. The Crédit Mobilier scandal broke in September 1872. The revelations caused the stock prices to plummet, and the Union Pacific and other investors took a huge financial loss. We covered the panic of 1873 in video 10. We told you that Jay Cooke's Northern Pacific Railroad collapse triggered the panic. What we didn't tell you was that investor confidence in railroad bonds had already been severely damaged by the Crédit Mobilier scandal the year before. When Henry Macomb's letters appeared in the New York Sun in September 1872, and the public learned that the men building America's railroads had been systematically defrauding the government while bribing Congress to look away, the willingness of ordinary investors to buy railroad bonds collapsed along with their trust. Jay Cooke's Northern Pacific bonds were already nearly impossible to sell when the Crédit Mobilier story broke. The scandal and the panic were not separate events. They were the same story. The Transcontinental Railroad was one of the greatest engineering achievements in American history. It united a continent. It opened markets. It transformed the economy. It was also built on fraud so brazen that the men who committed it felt comfortable enough to put the sitting Vice President of the United States on their stock distribution list. Crédit Mobilier is the founding case study in how federal infrastructure subsidies translate into private rents. Every rail, broadband, and stimulus debate since has been litigated in its shadow. The argument that built the Crédit Mobilier defense, that Ames had done nothing wrong except the patriotic act of building a railroad, is the same argument made for every corrupt infrastructure project since. We're building something great for America. The graft is just the cost of doing business. The men who are supposed to be watching? They're shareholders. The vault gets richer. And somewhere, always somewhere, something else is burning. Subscribe to Vault and Ruin. We go where the money went.